All right.
It happens naturally when
Okay,
Jews
so
get
we're
together.
starting out today, Memches Amud Aleph. We're a little past halfway down, and last week the discussion was primarily focused on the psukim in Vayikra that I read, and the upshot was that they were trying to prove that Rish Lakish was correct in saying that Meshicha is Midaraisa, not Momen, and therefore without Meshicha you can't have the Kinyan. And the main proof was from the fact, if you remember, that there were two psukim in Parshas Vayikra, the very end of the Parsha Vayikra, where the Torah says Nefesh Kisechata, and he does a sin, he's required to pay a chomesh, a 20% penalty, and to bring a korban. So then the Gemara says, the Torah says there, list the categories of things that fall into that situation, and it starts out by saying a picadon, or a loan, or wages, or if you found an Aveda, different things, and then a couple psukim later, the Torah explicitly says, if you will sin and do these things, right? Then it enumerates again what you should do and does not include a loan. So what we extrapolate from that is the fact that it does not repeat Sesumis Yod, meaning the loan. That's because no Mashicha was made. That's the drash that's learned. No Mashicha was made. There was Mashicha made on the others, but not on this one. That distinguishes the loan from the others, and therefore, since you didn't make Mashicha, therefore you're not chayiv in a korban. You didn't convert it because you didn't make Mashicha. So there's no chomesh, there's no korban, and that's the proof to Rish Lakish. That's the proof we want to bring that Rish Lakish is correct. So that's the way we ended last week, and we're again about 7 lines past the halfway. In the middle of the daf, it says v'sesumis yod lo hadra kro. So that's what we're going to start. So this is the Gemara's question. V'sesumis yod lo hadra kro, and does the pasuk not repeat sumis yod, because that's the proof you want to make to Rish Lakish, right? Then the first word on the next line you should be able to see v'hotanya. Does everybody have that? V'hotanya. We learned in a brisa, Amar Rab Shimon. Rab Shimon says, "Menayin litnisa Amar lamala lamata." How do you know? From where do you learn the principle that, in other words, lamala lamata means if you have two psukim, that the first pasuk embellishes or explains the second pasuk. In other words, Rab Shimon is asking for Menayin. How do you know this? How do you know that when you say one pasuk, that it affects the second pasuk? Because that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with two psukim. The first pasuk that lists it out, and then the second pasuk, which by its omission of sumis yod brings the raya to Rish Lakish. So he says, how do you know this? How do you know that there is such a metzias? Maybe it doesn't mean that at all. Why? Because the ksiv, so it says, O mikola asher yishava olav l'shakir. So let's look at the pasuk again. The pasuk says, in other words, after listing the different categories, and it says, it doesn't say Sesumis Yod, and then the pasuk says, "O mikol asher yishava alav l'shakir." What does that mean? All of a sudden, that's a very generic comment, because the others were specific to pikadon, to wages, to gezela, to all of the others. But then all of a sudden, the pasuk says, or whatever he swear falsely. It doesn't say what. So we want to bring a raya. So that's what the Gemara says here. And they said in the name of Rav, the Rabbas Tsumis Yod the Heshiva Mahade. So from this, we want to learn out to include Tsumis Yod. In other words, you want to say that it's a riot to Rosh Lakish because Tsumis Yod isn't said repeated. Why is it not repeated? Because there was no Mashiach, and that's why from that we learn to Rosh Lakish. That's not true, because even though the others were said in specificity listed, then the pasuk gave sort of a generalization, and he says everything where one person says a sheker is included in this punishment, in this penalty we're going to get. And what does that specifically refer to? So Rabbi Nachman, Rabbi Hyatt says in the name of Rab, the Rabbis Tsumis Yod L'Hashivim Badei. That specifically targets Tsumis Yod. That Tsumis Yod alone is also included even without Mashiach. And if you hold of that and you say that that's in fact the case, then Mashiach is not necessary, because even without Mashiach, you're chayiv to return it, and you're chayiv for a chomesh and a carbon, and that would be a direct proof. Well, it would be a proof to Rabbi Yochanan against Rosh Lakish. So again, we're still finishing up on this discussion of the psukim and what the psukim mean. And we're trying to infer that the fact that Tsumis Yod isn't mentioned is a raya to Rosh Lakish, and the Gemara says no, it's no raya, because because all these Amoraim say in the name of Rav that the generic term includes Tsumis Yod, and therefore it's no raya to Rosh Lakish. Okay, so that kind of sort of puts a damper on that approach. So the Gemara is going to answer no, that it's no damper, and it's still coming a ride to Rosh Lakish. But the Torah doesn't say it beferish. So now let's just parse this a bit. Okay, we have specific mention of all these other categories, which we talked about, Pikadon and Oshek, which is wages, and Aveda and Gezela. But Tsumis Yod, we don't have a specific reference that if you violate the loan, that you're chayiv in a carbon and in a chomesh. The Gemara wanted to say that's proof that because you didn't make Mashiach, therefore you're not chayiv. In other words, the link is that Mashiach is midaraisa, you didn't make Mashiach. Says the Gemara, yeah, but that's no proof, because inherent in the words Omachal Shamim L'Shaker is included to Tsumis Yod. So now the Gemara we just said a definitive answer. Mia lo hadra kro, but the Torah doesn't say so specifically. So what are we left with? We're left with the following. According to this view, really you can hold like Rosh Lakish, that Mashiach is required midaraisa. And why? Because it doesn't say Tsumis Yod specifically. But it says Yifol Yishav Yishaker, which generically includes, according to Rav and the other Amoraim, includes Tsumis Yod. So the Gemara wants to say, okay, but still in the specifics it doesn't include it, which means that Mashiach is absolutely required midaraisa. That which the Torah says, the Cholash Yeshava Alav L'Shaker, absolutely means, so that's further proof that when you do Mashiach, then you're chayiv. So in other words, the Gemara is turning around the pasuk and saying, truly, because it didn't say so specifically, it means that Mashiach wasn't done, and therefore midaraisa there is no chiyuv for a chomesh and for a carbon. But if you go ahead and do the Mashiach, that's when the Torah says to include Tsumis Yod generically, that's because you did the Mashiach. If you hadn't done the Mashiach, you wouldn't be included, because it wasn't included specifically. So the Gemara does a little bit of a twist here to show that yes, you can include Tsumis Yod generically, but only if there is Mashiach. in any event, again, this is a very sort of a little bit of a complicated sort of inyan, but we're left with the following. The further on top, Memches, if you remember, about 10 lines down, we said Omar Rava Krol Misnisa Masaila Rashlakish. Both a pasuk and a brisa will be proof positive to Rashlakish. The pasuk is what we've been reading, and now we're going to start understanding what the brisa is. But the conclusion that Rava pointed to is that the pasuk, in fact, because it doesn't include Sesumis Yod specifically, is a proof to Rish Lakish that you need Meshicha Midaraisa, and the fact that it's included not specifically but just generically in the pasuk is proof. It's kind of, by including it generically, you're proving the point that according to Rish Lakish you need Meshicha Midaraisa. All right, so unless anybody has any questions, it's a little bit of a complicated issue how you learn it from the pasuk. But he says you learn it from the pasuk because it doesn't say so beferish. Now, interestingly, now the Gemara is going to say misnisin minolon. Where do we know from a brisa to prove Rosh Lakish? Remember, here we're trying to prove Rosh Lakish that Meshicha is required midaraisa, and without it, you cannot, you don't make a kinyan, and therefore you're not chayiv. So from the pasuk, he just gave this whole explanation. Misnisa minolon. Where do you know it from a brisa? So he says the following: the Tanya, we learned in a brisa, nosna levalon moal. So you remember that we said earlier that Me'ila means where you take something from Hegdish and you use it for Chol. In other words, you take something Kodesh and use it for some mundane purposes without any proper exchange. If there is such an exchange, you just go ahead and use it. It was made Kodesh and you're using it for Chol. So what's the example he brings down? The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Nosnal Labalan Moel. If a person has a coin of Hegdish, which was made Kodesh, and he uses it to give to the attendant at the bathhouse, he used to go to the bathhouse, the Schwitz, whatever it was. So he takes this Kodesh coin without any reservation, and he gives it to the bathhouse. V'omar Rav, and Rav says, Dafka balanhu delo machasra meshicha, that the Gemara picks an example of a case that you know why you're chayiv, because you gave it to a person and there's no possible meshicha involved. In other words, if you have a bath, if you're the attendant in the bathhouse, and I come to you and say I want to use the bathhouse, and you give a coin, the attendant has no clue that this is a kodesh or not kodesh, but you know it is, so you give it to him. The minute you give it to him, you have been over the law of Mila, because there's nothing. In other words, there's no Mashiach required because you gave the coin. There's no reciprocity that the bathhouse manager or attendant has to do anything to conclude the Me'ila. So what is this a raya to? This is a raya. So says Rish Lakish will agree. He'll be maida that when no Mashiach is required, money is kaina. Remember, Rabbi Yochanan says that money is kaina midaraisa. Rish Lakish says Mashiach midaraisa. So this incident shows that Rish Lakish is willing to concede to Rabbi Yochanan that when no Mashiach is required, just exchanging the coin makes it chayiv, right? Says the Gemara, Dafka balon hu delo mechaser meshicha. Why does Rish Lakish admit to Rabbi Yochanan that money alone makes the kinyan when he says you need meshicha? That's only in the case of a bathhouse attendant because there is no Mashiach possible, right? There's nothing that the attendant can do Mashiach wise, which would cause us to say that giving the money to the bathhouse is not Me'ila because no Mashiach was done. In other words, the reciprocity that Rish Lakish says is when Mashiach is done, that's when you're chayiv. But in the case of a bathhouse, there's no Mashiach. Yeah, Jay.
What would Mashiach look like, assuming you needed it when he goes there?
That's his
How
point.
would the scenario look with Mashiach?
Right. So what he's extrapolating from that is the only reason why Rish Lakish admits to Rabbi Yochanan that money is enough is because there is no Mashiach possible. But where Mashiach is possible, you need Mashiach. In other words, it's a negative interpretation. This brisa, he wants to say, shows that Rabbi Lakish holds Mashiach is required because in a case of a bathhouse where there's no Mashiach possible, even possible, he admits that money makes the kinyan. But here's the but. But where Mashiach is possible, you need Mashiach. That's the extra words we have to add here. In other words, it's kind of an unusual case. He wants to bring a raya that Mashiach is required from a case where no Mashiach is possible.
But Rabbi, I have a question.
Yeah.
The fact that he is using that coin
Yes.
is hekdesh.
Yes.
Isn't that annulled in the end? The fact that it can't be used for that purpose because it's part of the temple treasury, and so therefore ultimately he can't conclude the transaction with that coin?
No, because what we're saying is that he violated. You're right. He shouldn't be able to use it, but he violated the principle.
Okay,
of
but
hekdesh.
can't the temple treasury say you misappropriated this? They can say to him, that's up to you, but they can go to the bathhouse owner and say, you've got to retrieve that coin because that's hekdesh.
Oh, okay.
So therefore, it has not been a transaction.
Right. I understand what you're asking. So you're saying that the hegdish should be able to annul the transaction by saying it never happened before.
And therefore, there's no transaction.
Right. And we're saying that hegdish does not have that right because the person is the one who owns the coin. And by making it hegdish, we presuppose that he will take that coin and dedicate it to hegdish, to kodesh.
He's dedicated it to hekdesh, but it's not literally the property of the base of
If he dedicated that specific coin to hekdesh, why doesn't it become hekdesh at the point he dedicates it? And the Beis Hamikdash has the right to retrieve that.
No. So
he has to substitute.
We wish that were the case, but that's not the case. In other words, the Beis Hamikdash the kodesh does not have control over that coin when it's still in the rishus of the person who's making it hegdish. They don't have the long arm of the law to be able to say, we're going to undo this terrible thing that he did, this meila, by pulling the coin away from the bathhouse. I understand your question, Michael. The answer is hegdish does not have that power. It's kodesh. And when he brings it to the Beis Hamikdash, then of course that's where he should bring it. But by not doing it, he's violating.
So I'll give another example.
But they don't know that he's going through this motion himself.
Right. They don't necessarily know, correct?
Because he doesn't announce it that I'm making this.
That's true. That's it. They wouldn't know anyway. But to your point, Michael, there is no such thing as the long arm of hegdish being able to retrieve it and undoing what he did. That's just not possible.
Right.
Not possible.
So maybe a similar sort of a thing might be, and I get confused about all the specifics. I could be wrong here. If you have a field and you separate some grain to be truma, and you might even declare this is truma, but you haven't given it to a particular kohen yet, so it's got this special kedusha to it, and it's not hekdesh, but it's got a special status to it.
Right.
And if you do something with it, you've now violated the kedusha of truma, and yet it's not that a kohen could come and say this. If you gave this to somebody that's not a kohen, the kohen couldn't go to the other person and say this was mine because it wasn't given to him. It's just that it had the status of truma.
Right. So in other words, in that particular case, if he gave it to a hedyot, right, he would be violating, of course, the mitzvah of giving truma to a kohen. but no Kohen has the Shlita, the Koach,
Right.
to come and say, I'm undoing what you did because you gave it to the wrong person. It belongs to me, because you're right. There was no specific Kohen anyway. Now, if there was a specific Kohen, then the Chayra, he could have a taina and say, you stole my truma, because this is mine. It was designated for me, and now you took it away. So I'm allowed to pursue you, but that's because the specific Kohen is doing it, not Kedusha, as it were, generically. There isn't an office of holiness that can come and undo giving it to a hedge. Right.
But the question here is, Machshava, he's thinking about this. He hasn't done any action. So what commitment does he have just by thinking that he's going to do something here? Or with the field, the same thing.
Well,
he might have actually said this point.
Then we go into the category of the Rebbeinu Shalom is Yodea Machshavas, right? That the Rebbeinu Shalom knows your Machshava and know what your intent was, but you didn't spell it out. So clearly, in our world, who knows? The Rebbeinu Shalom knows, but no one else knows what your thoughts were, that you had said this is going to be. You have to articulate it. In other words, you have to go and say before either before Bezdin or whoever it is. You say this coin is kodesh. Now we know it's kodesh. So therefore, when you go ahead and violate, you're violating something that Kedusha.
So he has to publicize it somehow.
He has to publicize it. Otherwise, only you know it. Nobody else knows it.
That's what I'm saying. It wouldn't go any further if you just kept it in your head.
If you kept it in your head, no one knew. Correct. There has to be some public acknowledgement that this is coded. Exactly.
So give a modern comparison to the bathhouse thing. Let me give a hypothetical. Sometimes if you go to an amusement park or concert or whatever, sometimes it's you pay your money and then you walk right in. That would be like the bathhouse. But there are other times where you pay your money at the ticket booth, they hand you a ticket, and then you hand that to the next person who lets you in. And so in that second case, there is a Mashiach, and in the first case, there isn't, even though nominally it's you pay your $10 and you get in.
Yeah.
But wait, to me, this is an exchange. It's not an acquisition. We talked about this all along, and that is, it's like produce. You can exchange produce for a service. You can exchange a coin for a service. It's not an acquisition, it's an exchange. So what are you buying here? You're exchanging the right for the right to go to the bathhouse. You're exchanging a coin which has value, but it's not an acquisition.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, though, is that there are some cases where it works that way, and there are others where you are given a ticket,
but even with
which the value of the ticket is that you can walk in.
And you're exchanging
Michael's saying the only thing that's going on is you're getting admission for mission. That's all. There's nothing else happening.
You're not buying anything. You don't own anything. It's the right to use a facility. It's
right to walk past the gate.
Like produce, it's a coin instead of produce. Why are we acquiring something?
Well, in the context of our Gemara, let's focus on the point. In the context of our Gemara, we're trying to bring a raya, whether or not, even in the case of Meila, where you're doing something, is there Meila without doing a Mashiach? Remember, this whole discussion is in the context of Rish Lakish, who says you need to have a physical act, a Mashiach, a physical act, in order to be Chai.
What's a Mashiach? I missed the last few sessions.
Okay, Mashiach is the classical. I've got to take an item and push it, do something to this inanimate object in order to show that it's mine. In other words,
you have to walk 4 Dalet Amot or something?
Dalet Amos, or take it and push it across the table. In other words, anything.
And the example, the pen that you, when you do the selling the chametz with the rabbi, and you take a pen and you hand it over and lift it
That's
up.
the machine. That's the machine. They're tagbal, but mashicha, right? There you made the kinyan. So let's put it in context. In the case of the bathhouse, you took a dovish of a hegdish and you gave it to the bathhouse owner. Did you do anything at that point? You didn't even use the bathhouse yet. You just gave it into his hand. Should that be a violation of Kodesh because you put it in his hand? Says the Gemara. So listen to this. Says the Gemara. Because there is no Mashiach possible in that scenario. There is nothing to be Moshach. There's nothing to be make a kinyan. The minute you put it into the attendant's hand, before you've even used the bathhouse, you're chayiv. Even Rosh Lakish will say you're chayiv. Why? Because Ma'os konos, like Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said the minute that dollar passed from the owner's hand to the bathhouse manager's hand, there is a kinyan. But nothing happened. So what? Ma'os konos, Rosh Lakish admits Ma'os konos.
But
Now, by Rosh Lakish admitting, just listen to this, Michael. By Rosh Lakish admitting that Mos Konos, he brings proof to his own theory that where Mashiach is possible in a scenario where you can make a Mashiach, you need to make a Mashiach for it to be Kona. You will not be Kona. You will not violate anything unless a Mashiach happens. The reason why he agrees with Rabbi Yochanan that you are violative of Hegdish in the case of the bathhouse owner is because no Mashiach is possible. Reality, there's no Mashiach that can happen here. Therefore, he says, I agree with you, Rabbi Yochanan, that money is Kona.
But that's not what's happening here. First of all, he's stolen the money from the temple treasury.
Right. And we're punishing him.
So he has given something that is not, since we're focusing on Me'ilah.
No, okay, so I see where you're
stage coin and another coin.
Okay, but Michael, I think I see what your issue is. You're saying that he is using not his own money,
right,
but Hekdesh money, and therefore he shouldn't be liable. And what I'm trying to explain is that the money is Kodesh, but doesn't belong in a larger sense. Hekdesh should have a right to it, but it won't be in Hekdesh's right until
so
it comes into
Hekdesh out of the
into
equation.
force.
Take Hekdesh out of the equation. He has a regular coin. Forget about Me'ilah. And he exchanges that coin for the right to use a bathhouse.
Right.
Is he buying something or is he exchanging a coin for a service? It's no different in the case of Me'ilah, where it's a temple treasury coin. He's still exchanging a.
No. But you can't use a Hekdesh coin to buy anything. You're buying the right to go into the bathhouse with a Hekdesh coin.
But you're not buying. You're in
that's an issue, Michael. That's an issue.
So you're not buying anything.
Well, we're using the term buying loosely. You are acquiring a right. You're buying it or exchanging it.
But we talked. I mean, correct.
You're acquiring a right.
The whole Gemara beforehand distinguished between: are you exchanging or are you buying?
No, okay. So let's be definitive. You're buying the right. You're buying a right to use the bathhouse for the coin, and by buying that right, you're over the isser of using.
But you don't own anything. You have the right. You're not moving, like you said. There's no Mashiach possible. So you're not buying anything.
So Michael, that's the chiddush of the. You're absolutely right. But that's the chiddush of this brisa. This brisa is being mechadesh. It is cluing us into something that we have heretofore not really encountered. That if you take this coin of Hegdish. And
I don't believe the Reish Lakish
you haven't used the bathhouse yet. For all you know, you're going to break your leg and never get into the bath. But you bought a right which is already violating Hegdish. The fact that you gave the coin, you bought the right, and that buying that right violates Hegdish. Says the Gemara, says the Brisa, that's a proof to Reish Lakish, because Reish Lakish would only even agree to such a thing that the money bought you that right, and therefore you violated hektish.
So
You would
Mike-
only agree to it in a scenario where there can't be a reciprocal meshicha. But where there can be a reciprocal meshicha, then giving the money to the bathhouse is absolutely doing
Like
nothing.
you said, he hasn't bought anything yet. He handed a coin. He hasn't.
No, but that's the
That's
chiddush.
He handed a coin.
You handed a coin, and the chiddush is you don't have to do anything, Michael.
But
You don't
wait a
have to
minute.
do anything.
But that's taking money from the temple treasury. So it's
Correct.
not an acquisition. At
Well,
that
Michael-
point, you're taking somebody else's money to buy
No,
something.
it's not. It's
No,
not
but-
somebody else's
But
money.
Michael's basic question is, what is the status when you actually have to pay money for something called admission?
Right.
Admission means that the cop will not kick you out
Right.
or take you to
Right,
jail
we-
because you don't belong there. So what is the status of transferring money to get admission into an?
Right. Well, I don't think it's just admission. I think it'll be any services. We've
Well,
essentially
everything
got
that comes with it.
three. We've got three different categories. Historically, we always talk about you've got karka and you got metaltal. And with karka, you have all kinds of rules about how you do a transaction.
Right.
And you have metaltal and you have all kinds of rules. We have mashicha and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
And now we're saying there's a third entirely different thing. There's a transaction that's entirely about services rendered, so there's no mashicha, and therefore, at what point is the transaction officially completed?
And why, when the attendant
Yeah.
takes the money and lifts it and puts it in his pocket, why isn't that considered equivalent to Mashiach?
And that's what we're saying, is that that completes the transaction, and therefore any issue of Me'ila is done at that specific point. But it's not Mashicha, because Mashicha refers not to the coin. Mashicha will refer to the object being bought, and there is no object.
Correct. So Menashe is correct that, and to your point, Mike, Jay, you can't have Mashicha with the money because Mashicha can only apply to the payers, to the chayfetz, and we have no chayfetz here. So this is a positionless situation where there's only a one-sided transfer of money. And in such a case where Mashiach is not possible, Rish Lakish agrees with Rabbi Yochanan that money alone makes the kinyan. Now, the chiddush is that in this situation, the fellow doesn't have to go through with actually taking the bath. The fact that he transferred the money to the bathhouse manager, and the bathhouse manager now owns that money, no refunds possible, that makes the kinyan, and therefore he's chayiv in Me'ila because he violated the transaction. Michael, the whole inyan of Hegdish having rights to that coin is really not relevant because sure it's their coin, but they have no ability to interfere in this transaction just because he dedicated this coin to Hektish.
But wait a minute, Rabbi, without
time the Beis
Hektish-
Hamikdash can maintain, quote, ownership is if it actually was put into the pushka or was actually in the possession of Hegdish, then they have control of the coin. Prior to that, it's the equivalent of Gezela, let's say. I take if I steal something from you, why should I be chayiv? You have the right to come back and take it away from me. Why should I be chayiv Gezela?
That's what I don't understand, why the temple doesn't have that same right.
Because I'm telling you definitively, they don't have that right. There is no right inherent in the kedusha of that coin that allows Hegdish to undo someone who does something improper with the coin. There's no such rule that exists. I know you want it to be, and therefore Hegdish should be able to say, we own it. But as long as you have not deposited it into the bank, into the Hegdish's bank, it's still yours, you're the custodian, let's just say, you're the custodian of that coin, and you can do something improper with that coin that Hagdish cannot undo.
So Rabbi, if I had that coin and I declared it hekdesh and I gave it to somebody else, I didn't exchange it for a service, and I put it in the hands of somebody else without a service, and I just gave it to you. Let's say I gave it as a gift. Is that not the same situation where Meila is now official because it's in the hands of a third party?
No. So that's a different different issue. Is the question whether or not can someone find favor from somebody else by using hagdish? Because if I give you a matana, and the Gemara talks about that if I give you a matana and I derive a benefit from that matana and it's hagdish, then arguably I have violated a principle because I'm getting a benefit from hagdish. The key word is you're not allowed to benefit from hagdish. If I give you something for safekeeping, do me a favor, Michael, hold this coin for me while I go down the street. I have not violated hagdish because I have no, theoretically, man, you're holding it for me, but that's not considered violating hagdish when I ask you to hold it for me. But if I give it to you and you're going to give it back to me, but you're going to use it for commerce or whatever else that you're going to use it for, and then come back to me, arguably you have violated hagdish. Hagdish is a very, very narrow window.
But technically, Rabbi, if I haven't used the bathhouse yet, I could substitute a different coin for the hekdesh coin.
No, that's the point.
Well,
You can't.
Michael, you're right, except the Rabbi Yochanan says that the minute that money transfers hands, midoraisa, you've already bought the right to the bathhouse.
I understand that that's Rabbi Yochanan's position.
That's where the problem
I don't think
arises.
it's Reish Lakish's position.
Right. So Rosh Lakish is saying, absent the possibility of Mashiach, I can only agree with Rabbi Yochanan that the minute you gave that coin in commerce to someone else, you have violated hagdish, even if you haven't used the bathhouse yet, and you're going to come back to the bathhouse manager and say, do me a favor, I didn't use the bathhouse, I'd like to have the coin back, but you have already violated hagdish by having made the transaction.
But the difference is does Reish Lakish think that it's a Mashiach, or does he think it's a violation of Me'ilah? They're two different things.
He does not think there's a Mashiach, absolutely not.
Okay.
But he's saying in that particular incident, you don't need Mashiach. You don't need Mashiach to trigger an Isser. Just passing the money.
They're not agreeing. They're just agreeing that it's an Isser to do that, but not for the same reason.
Well, I mean, de facto, Reish Lakish is saying that in this particular incident, I'm going to agree with Rabbi Yochanan. You don't have to say those words. I'm just saying that the Gemara is telling us that there is no dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish in this particular event, because Mashiach is not possible. And when Mashiach is not possible, Rav Lakish doesn't say you need Mashiach Midaraisa. There's no Mashiach.
But I thought the whole point of the Inyan was that it was affirming Rabbi Yochanan's position on Mashiach, and it's not a Mashiach.
No. We want to affirm. Yes, we want to affirm Reish Lakish's position that Mashiach is Kona, and we want to do it from a case where we know Mashiach is possible, and we want to infer from that. Listen, we want to infer from that since no Mashiach is possible, only then will we agree with Rabbi Yochanan. But when Mashiach is even remotely possible, you need Mashiach Midaraisa. In other words, it's a backhanded way of proving Reish Lakish by saying that he'll agree with Rabbi Yochanan when there's no Mashiach, because if there's even a speck of possibility that there's Mashiach, that's the only way you're going to Midaraisa.
But the only thing he's agreeing with is he's over Me'ilah, but not because of the concept of Mashiach.
Well, so let's look at the words of the Gemara. Maybe this will help, Michael. Let's just take a look at the Gemara. Misnissen Menola. The Tanya we learned in the Brisa, Noslan Labalan Moal. If you gave it to the Balan, you're over Me'ilah. V'omer Rav, Okay, this is the punchline. Va'omer Rav, Dafka Bala Nudel Machosar Mashicha. The reason why when you gave it to the bathhouse manager, you're chayiv, because there was no lacking of Mashicha, because Mashicha wasn't possible. But in another scenario, the Machasra Mashicha, but in another scenario where you are required to have Mashicha and don't make Mashicha, lo mal ad the Moshe. Then there is no Me'ila until you make the Mashicha. In
Right.
other words,
So I'll
this
give you
is the proof to Rish Lakish. Rish Lakish says you need to have Mashicha, and in every case where Mashicha is even possible, you have to have Mashicha b'deraisa. But in a case where Mashicha isn't possible because there's no way to make a Mashicha. Lifting the coin is not a Mashicha. By giving the money to the bathhouse manager, that's not Mashicha, and there's no corresponding Mashicha that the bathhouse guy has to reciprocate. Therefore, that's the outlier where Rish Lakish is going to say, you know what, you're right, Rabbi Yochanan. Money is kinda because no Mashicha is possible. But Rav makes it very clear that when you have Mashicha, or there's a possibility of Mashicha, then you're able to do it. Now, let me just say the next line to reinforce what we just said. Frank the Gemara. So that's supposed to be the proof to Rish Lakish. In other words, it's a negative proof. It's a proof that Mashiach is required, because in a case where no Mashiach is possible, that's the only way you can make a kinyan. Frank the Gemara of Hotanya, we learned in another brayso, Nosnul Saper Moal. Different case. You go to a barber and you want to get a haircut, right? Not a bathhouse. You want to go to a barber, and you take this sacred coin, the coin that you now dedicated to the Beis Hamikdash, to Hegdish, and you give it to the barber, right? Now, the barber, now you have the tangible barber's tools, for which one can make Mashicha. You hear this? In other words, I'm coming to you, you're the barber, and I'm giving you a coin, and you're going to give me a haircut. So, is a Mashicha possible here before the haircut? Yes. By taking the tools, the scissor and the comb, whatever, and making a Mashicha, that's a possibility, right? So the Chayra, you would think that where Mashicha is possible, then Rish Lakish should say that you're chayiv. V'saper ha b'olam b'mshach tisparis. So we see that
that's very strange, because you go into the barber, you're not trying to do anything with his tools. You're not trying to buy them or anything. The tools are the
And
barbers.
right, and you don't normally touch those tools.
right. But again, is a Mashicha possible? In the case of a bathhouse person, there is nothing to be moshach. There's nothing to make a kinyan.
Right.
In this particular brisa, we're specifically saying you go to someone who has kalim, tools, for which one can make a Mashicha. Nevertheless, the brisa says, let me finish, the brisa says that the minute you give the money to the barber, you're over in Hagdish. You're over in making Mila. Wait a minute. Why are you over for Hagdish when you go to a barber where Mashicha is possible?
What kind of Mashiach here? Because you're not going in there for scissors and combs. What you're changing the topic in terms of inserting the notion that his tools are now somehow possible. Sure, if you went in there to try and buy an extra set of tools that he has on the side, that's already a good Mashiach case. But the tools that he's going to use to give you a haircut are not for sale.
Right, and it's not even like you're renting. You're not renting the
Right.
barber's
You're not renting
tools.
anything.
Right. So I hear all the comments, and you. So
I just don't understand.
that you're right. In a certain sense, what business does he have to be Isaac in the barber's tools that he should make a Mashiach? But if you look back at what we just said in the first brisa, Rav said the only reason why when you give the coin to the bathhouse man, you're over the lav, lo machaser Mashiach, because in the remotest sense, Mashiach is not possible because there's nothing to be marsha. But Rav says, Abomidi Achrita, we just said this, Abomidi Achrita, the Machaser Mashiach. But in any other case where you don't have to make Mashiach, of course, when you go to the barber, but there is a Mashiach possible, let me repeat, Abomidi Achrita, the Machaser Mashiach, but in any other case where the Mashiach, there's a possibility of you're going into the barber.
Somebody else could have come in and said, I want to buy your tools.
Right, and taken those tools and move them, even though that's not the norm. But since Mashiach is a possibility,
that's
and
the
you don't do
possibility.
Mashiach, according to Rosh Lakish, you're not chayiv midaraisa. So why does that brisa say that the minute you gave the money to the barber, you're over the lav of Mashiach? Why are you over the lav of Mashiach? I'm sorry, you're over the lav of Me'ilah. Why are you over that lav? There was the possibility, not the likelihood or the norm. There was the possibility of doing Mashiach, and Rav explicitly said, where there's a possibility of doing Mashiach, then you have to have Mashiach in order to be over midaraisa, and without it, you're not. But yet the Brisa says that you're over Me'ilah. That's an Issa Daraisa.
You don't need a barber example. The minute you go with this coin that's been stolen, the way Michael says it, from the treasury, into any kind of commerce building, there's always something there that you could buy or could want to rent or whatever it is. Right away, the remote possibility is there, very unlikely, and that's the argument that the very unlikely possibility puts it in a different category than admission to the amusement park.
You could have bought the bathhouse too.
Okay, so take a look. Okay, let's just look at the Rashi, the last two lines on the bottom before the wider line, right? The last two lines, Rashi says, "Hoi boy limshach." In the case of the barber, he could have made Mashiach. What does Rashi say? Hi soicher had tispires. The barber, the barber, the bechol midi, the isbe mal limshach. In any case where there's a possibility of doing Mashiach, even though it's not normal to do Mashiach, Jay, because who moves the tools before he gets a haircut? You don't go in and say, oh, I like this scissor, and you move the scissor, or I like the comb. That's not your business. You go in, you sit in the chair, you let him start to do the work. But Rashi explicitly said, the b'chol midi the isbe mal limsho, in any case where there is something to move, not that you have to move it or that you would normally move it, but where Mashiach is a possibility, however remote, lo kana ad the mashach, says Rashi. You're not kind until you make the Mashiach. Now that sounds wild. I go into a barber and I want to get a haircut, and I sit in the chair. I don't have a havamina that I'm going to tell the barber use this scissor or this. His tools are sitting on a platform, and he does everything. But Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi doesn't say that, that the norm is for him to make Mashiach. He says, where there is the possibility, the chomidi, the isbe mal limsho, if there is something to make Mashiach with, even if it's less than 1% that you'll do it, you need Mashiach in order to make the Kenyan. That's the point that Rav was making. Therefore, let me just say, when you don't make Mashiach, you're not over an Issa Deraisa. Why does the Brisa say that when you go into a barber and you give him the coin, you're over Me'ilah, an Issa Deraisa? Why are you over Me'ilah? You didn't make Mashiach. What Mashiach? The Mashiach that's in front of you that you could have made. You didn't make it because it's not the norm to make it, but you could have made it. That's exactly the point here, that where there is a possibility of making Mashiach, you're not over the Raisa, and that's the proof to Rosh Lakish. I'm agreeing with you. This is a very strained, difficult concept. What are you talking about, Mashiach? I'm learning that Mashiach is Midaraisa because I gave money to a bathhouse person and he doesn't, there's no ability to make Mashiach. Okay, that's one strange thought. Now you're going to tell me that I'm going to go into a barber and I'm going to give him a coin and I'm over Me'ila. Why am I over Me'ila? What did I do? Because you know why? So that's the kasha. How can Rish Lakish say that you need Mashiach? We see from here that even without Mashiach, where you could make it, there is an Issa Deraisa. This is the kasha on Rish Lakish.
Right, but Michael's case with the bathhouse, the minute you pay the admission fee, somebody's giving you a towel. Right,
Correct.
so there is something
And
going on.
that's the
Depends
chiddush.
on the bathhouse.
Jay, but that's the actual chiddush, is that there does not have to be any kind of action. No giving of a towel, no going into the bath, nothing. Nothing has to be done in order for there to be an Issa Deraisa, because there is no Mashiach possible. Oh, you're going to say you could give it, but that's not Mashiach.
But Rabbi, let me ask you a question.
No, giving the towel certainly would be Mashiach, but
Barber's tools are the
not
same
necessarily work that way.
But the barber's tools are in the same category as the towels that they give you.
Right.
In
So
the bathhouse, it should be the same.
They should be the same. You're renting the item in a sense, but that we don't know that those bathhouses that they actually did that. Maybe they didn't give you the toww.
Yeah,
Rabbi, in
he doesn't
anything
mention,
you
yeah,
do-
I mean, there's no comment, Rashi, no one says anything about a towel. Maybe they didn't give you, you're right, maybe you brought your own towel. And you know, in many places, that's the case. You bring your own, right? You go to the mikveh, you bring your own sometimes. You don't
But
necessarily
Rabbi,
get a towel
even
from the
this
mikveh.
concept, if you went into the barber shop and you moved the pair of scissors,
Yeah,
it doesn't mean you've acquired it, because you need acceptance. Because I could walk in anywhere and be able to do that. So this concept that it could be in any specific case, you're dealing with a hekdesh, you have the potential to violate that rule, to buy anything and to use it. So you're going to say, if the potential exists, regardless of what it is, you're over Me'ila, which goes back to my point about it's the temple's money. So you put it in somebody else's hands, it's theirs. Once it's in your hands, it's in your possession because you've dedicated or declared it. Once it goes into somebody else's hands, it has that potential. So Me'ila can exist because of that. Just like Mashiach can possibly exist in any scenario you think of, but the seller, a potential seller, can say, it's not for sale, especially not for that coin. So I don't understand why any potential thing is Me'ila when it goes into somebody else's hands. At that point, it's a Me'ila issue. You've taken money from the temple treasury and you put it elsewhere. So it's their money. It doesn't have anything to do with Mashiach.
okay, so
Throw out another issue, which is the bathhouse. It's pretty clear to me. Okay, they have a bathhouse. You're paying to get into it and use it. Fine. Yes, there are employees there, but you're not paying for those employees specifically. You're paying for a unit of bathhouse used for an hour or whatever it is.
you pay for a use, yeah.
All right. When you go to a barber, and I think about it now, normally I pay the barber at the end. And to me, a barber is more like you hire somebody to clean your house or to plow your field or whatever. You're paying an employee. I mean, it's a 1099, not a W-2, okay? But you're paying a person to do something as opposed to paying for a unit of service. And that's a whole different ball game. That gets into the whole, sort of the employment law that you have to pay your employees on time and things like that. It's a different kind of a thing. And so I don't know that it would be equivalent then to, you pay somebody to clean your house. Is there any, or plow your field, or is there any Mashiach involved? No, you're paying the person for doing stuff. You're not buying stuff.
So when you buy an airline ticket,
It
when you
seems
when
to me
you
that the
take the
custom of the time was to pay for the service before the service. Notwithstanding what we do today, it seems that when you go to get a haircut or whatever it was, you transfer the money before the action. That's what the Gemara is telling us. Okay, that was the custom of the time, so we have to accept that. Now, the distinction between these two cases is that in the one case, you're paying for the right, again, let's assume it's your own towel, that you're not getting anything other than the right to step into a bath. Okay. So you're paying your money and you're going to step into a bath. There is no Mashiach possible in that scenario whatsoever because the facts dictate that it's a completely one-sided thing. I transfer, I give my money, go to the bathhouse, I go to the pool, whatever it is. Says the Gemara, the minute you give that money, you have desecrated Kodesh because you paid for something mundane with a Hegdish coin. Okay, those are the facts. I mean, we're not going to go to the extraneous now, but what Michael was saying that, but maybe Hegdish can undo it. Let's just say, no, they can't. You've done a deed. It's an Issa D'Oraisa. You violate. Everybody agrees. Shlakish, everybody says you've done a bad thing here, and you're chayav mid'oraisa. What Rabbi Yochanan, of course, says that, but when Shlakish agrees, because the concept that this brisa is teaching us is that where no Mashiach is possible, there's no machlokes. Only when Mashiach is possible. However remotely possible, or even remotely possible, then you have to have the Mashiach according to Rish Lakish. Says the Gemara, and brings down a second example, the example of a barber. Now, here we're going to go back and forth and dispute, but let's just look at the facts. The facts are that at that particular point in time, you went into a barber, you gave him the money. Now, under the principles of the bathhouse, the minute you gave him the money, you took Hegdish, you took something Kodesh, and you desecrated it into mundane. You're over Allah. Period. End of story. According to Rabbi Yochanan, of course you're over Allah. Why? Because money is kindness. The kasha here is, how do you reconcile this brisa with Rish Lakish? We're trying to bring a proof to Rish Lakish that where there is Mashiach possible, you have to make Mashiach in order to be an Issa D'Oraisa. From the brisa of the barber, we see that the minute he gave him the money, he has desecrated Hegdish, even though no Mashiach was done. Oh, you're going to ask, what Mashiach? Where's Mashiach? The answer is, and Rashi makes it a specific point, that when there are items, tools, any item, that Mashiach can be made, you're going to say, but that's not normal. Who picks up a scissor? Who picks up a comb? Who does that? But since there is an item that where it can be moshach, you can make a kinyan on something, then it's considered that you have to make the kinyan in order for it to happen. But you're going to say, but that's absurd. 99 out of 100 people go into a barber, they sit in the chair and they wait to be cut. Maybe one person on a blue moon is going to say, let me take this scissor or this comb or whatever, and let me give it a schlep, let me give it a move. So because it's so remote, you might argue that Mashiach it's just like the bathhouse. There's nothing to be done here. The Gemara is telling us, and Rashi is pinpointing this, that according to Rab, where Mashiach, however remote, if Mashiach is in the Parsha, as we say, then you have to make Mashiach according to Rish Lakish. And he didn't make Mashiach here. What the kasha is on Rish Lakish. Why are you over Me'ilah? You should have made a Mashiach, or you could have made a Mashiach, and you didn't make it. And according to him, there's no Issa D'Oraisa, i.e., there's no Issa Me'ilah, which is an Issa D'Oraisa without Mashiach. That's the kasha. Now, we can argue all day long, who does that? Nobody does that. It's not the thing to do. But, and again, certainly today, we don't do that. But it seems that from what the Gemara is telling us at the time of the Gemara, there may have been a havamina that somebody who goes in to take a haircut rearranges the comb and the brush and the scissor, and then sits down in his chair.
So
Not something you and I would even think of doing, but again, in the time of the Gemara, we're extrapolating that was the possibility. Even if one person remotely did it, that's enough to say that there is a
And actually,
possibility.
I realize it does happen.
So is
Right.
it only true because it's the barber's scissors, or the fact that a scissor is part of commerce in general? You can always go and buy scissors and combs and so on. The fact that they're sitting there says that these are the items are the one that throws it into this category, rather than the specific ones that the barber has himself. Because you're not going to likely buy his; he needs them for work. But
No,
the
it's got to be
fact that
something
the
that's
items,
relevant to this.
the
But you
fact
know
that
what?
the
I
items
think
can be purchased
I think the
somewhere
point
else.
is- Yeah, I think the point here is that in any case where there isn't just an exchange of money, there is something on the other side that is going to happen. Nothing, again, in the case of the bathhouse, nothing is going to happen. He just lets you in, and then nothing can possibly happen. But where something can happen, as remote as it is, that something will happen, but since it can happen, that's the point that Rashi is emphasizing, that there is something there to make Mashiach on. There is nothing in the bathhouse scenario that you can even make Mashiach on. Again, obviously, there's no towel.
But there's an example here, actually real world. I realize there is one. Okay. I go to the barber, he does his thing with the hair, the trimmer and the comb and the scissors.
Yeah.
At the end, before he's totally done, to make sure I'm good, he hands me a mirror. And I hold that up so I can look closely. That would be Mashiach.
In theory, perhaps yes. In theory, perhaps yeah. But remember that we're focusing here on not the. Okay, let's say that you're right, Menashe, but we're focusing on the beginning of the event, not the end of the event. So when does Mashiach trigger? When you make the transaction, I give you the money, you do the Mashiach, then we have a complete picture. Now, the minute he does that, Me'ila is chal. Me'ila happens because you've completed the circuit, so to speak. The light goes on because you've completed the circuit. I gave you the money, you did the Mashiach, done. So Mashiach has to be done in real time in order. In other words, there would be no Me'ila in this scenario until the end of the haircut. And the point we're trying to make is that so there's, again, maybe that can happen. I'm not saying that it shouldn't happen, but again, we're focused on the theoretical possibility that a Mashiach could be made. If a Mashiach can be made in a scenario, however unlikely, and again, maybe it's less than 1% that someone would make a Mashiach. And again, in the time of the Gemara, I mean, we have to sort of picture ourselves and say, there must have been that possibility. The Gemara is unless the Gemara is positing a case just to tell us a case that has no Metzias, that has no reality, which I don't think the Gemara is necessarily doing. It's not saying that as a reality, it never happens. It's saying that it could happen because there is something that Mashiach can be made on. So then now this is the Kasha and Rish Lakish. How could Rish Lakish say that he'll agree to that brisa, that when you give the money to the barber, you're even Me'ila? Why is there a Me'ila without Mashiach if Mashiach is Midaraisa? So let's just finish the thought, because we can really go around and around on this. So the Gemara gives an interesting answer. Again, sometimes the Gemara gives the easy way out. So the easy way out is Bisaper Nochri. You're talking about a non-Jewish barber. So what's pshat? The lav bar Mashiach, who, in other words, Meshicha only is chal between Jews. Why? Because the whole Indian of Meshicha and Isser has to be with someone who is a bar Meshicha. In other words, you have to be someone to whom Meshicha is an Isser. A Nachri has no Isser. There's no Isser to a Nachri, whether he makes Meshicha, doesn't make Meshicha, that it doesn't come into the parsha. So the Gemara is telling us that the scenario of that brisa is the reason why you're over the lav of Me'ilah. The minute you give him the money is because you're dealing with a non-Jewish barber. So you desecrated holy money that should have gone to the Hegdish. You desecrated by giving it to someone for a service that was improper. He doesn't have to do anything. In other words, there is no reciprocal Meshicha that can happen here because Meshicha is not chal by a Nachri. That's the Gemara's answer.
So then the question comes up, what happens, you go into a non-Jewish store and you take a coin out of your pocket and hand it to the non-Jewish shopkeeper, and it's a non-Jewish owner of the store, non-Jewish clerk, and you hand it to him to then go take an apple. What point is Me'ilah happen?
Say it again. What's the case?
Okay, I go into I have a Hekdesh coin. I go into a store that is owned by non-Jews, run by non-Jews. The clerk is a non-Jew,
Right.
And I hand him a coin and pick up and he hands me an apple. At what point is Me'ilah happened?
The minute that you gave the Nachri the coin to acquire the fruit. That's like the bathhouse. So the minute you transfer that money to someone else in an acquisition or in a transaction, a real transaction.
Right, but we're saying then is that's because Meshicha, even though it's physically the same as when anybody else hands anything to anybody else, if they're Jews,
Correct.
That even though I've got an actual physical object, and even though I could turn around and until he hands me the apple, I could say, oh, never mind, give me the coin back. I've now made Me'ilah at that point.
Right. Exactly. So the Nachri negates the requirement for the Meshicha to happen, which de facto then means that Rosh Lakish isn't on the hot seat, because Rosh Lakish says you have to have Meshicha. You know why there was no Meshicha here, even though there was a possibility of Meshicha? Because it's a Goy. And a Goy, there's no Meshicha. Because, in other words, the theory was that wherever there is even the remote possibility of Meshicha, you have to make it in order to be chayiv. So how can you be chayiv when you give it to a barber? The answer is because you gave it to a goy, so that second act of Meshicha never has to happen. You're already over the law. So this brisa to Rosh Lakish is the same as the bathhouse brisa, or your case of buying a fruit from a non-Jew. They're all the same. That it's a one-sided event, no Meshicha possible, because it's a goy, right? No Meshicha possible. Therefore, the minute that you transact and give that coin of Hegdish, you're over the lav, even though there is no reciprocal event, which according to Rosh Lakish has to happen. Teretz is it doesn't have to happen. So let's just finish up. So that's the case. You're talking about a goy. Tanya Nami Hachi, we're going to bring a proof that that's the case of what we just said. Nosla L'Saper, if he gave the money to a barber or L'Sofa. So L'Sofa is if you're going to take a ride on a boat, right, and a sfina, and so you gave it to the boatman or L'Chol Bali Umnis, or to any tradesman, right, anybody who's a tradesman, Lo Mol Ad Moshe, then there is no Me'ilah until the reciprocal, again, talking about a Jew, right? Let's say a Jewish boatman or a Jewish barber, then there is no Me'ilah until the Meshicha. Koshana Hadadi. So then, so it looks like there's a steer in the brisa. One brisa by the barber says that you are over Me'ilah, right? And this brisa says, beferish, that you're not Lomol at the Moshe. So how do you reconcile the brises? Elalav Shmamina kan bisaper Nochri, kan bisaper Yisrael Shmamina. So in other words, the conclusion, the proof why there's no stira in the brises is because the brisa by a barber is talking about a Nochri. the brisa by a boatman or a barber or anybody else where there is meila is talking about a Jewish tradesman, a boatman, whoever it happens to be. So the Gemara wants to bring a raya that that's in fact the case. That brisa that says by the barber you're over, even though you have not yet done Mashiach, is talking about a non-Jew, and this one is talking about a Jew. So let's quickly look at Rashi. Habar Limshach, we said, Nachri lo shayich boy din Mashiach. There is no Mashiach by a Nachri, the biyad amisecha ksiv, because it says biyad amisecha in the pasuk. Who is amisecha? A fellow Jew. That's the only kashna hadadi. Saper asaper. One case of barber, you're not, you are over. In one case, in the first one, you're not over. Why? Okay. So the answer is because one is about a nachri, and where there's a nachri, you're not over, and when there is a Jewish tradesman, you're over. So again, we want to bring a raya. Remember, we said Omar Rava is going to bring a raya to Rish Lakish from a pasuk, which was the psukim we read last week and this morning. And then from the brisa, this is the brisa that he brings the raya to Rish Lakish, and he's saying it de facto. What's the raya? The raya is you see that you're over meila in every situation where Mashiach is either not possible or is chal because it's a goy. So in other words, that's the proof. The proof is in the fact that where no Mashiach happens and there is meila, because Rish Lakish says, of course, you're over a lav because you did something improper. But where Mashiach is possible, not probable, not even likely, but when Mashiach is possible, you have to make that Mashiach in order to be over, which is proof positive that Mashiach is midaraisa, because without it, you're not over meila. And that's exactly what this Bryce is telling us. So, okay, we're going to pick up next week to slug that, but as of this point, we have now concluded that there is both a pasuk in the Torah and a brisa proving to Rish Lakish, even though this spirited conversation this morning was very much a question of how the principles of Me'ilah apply. That's why, Michael, I was saying that again, you have to take it on a fact, on a faith, that with Me'ilah, the only time Hagdish has control of that coin is when it was actually submitted to Hagdish. Before it's submitted to Hagdish, it's like it belongs to you. In other words, you control it, and therefore you commit a sin when you control something from Hagdish and don't use it for Hagdish or give it to the base of Mikdash. I mean, if you use it for Hagdish, you give it to Tzedakah, that's fine. But you are in control, and Hagdish has no rights to that coin until it comes into its possession, the possession of the Hagdish, and therefore they can't undo your Isser. Your Isser, the whole point of Me'ilah, otherwise there would never be Me'ilah if the Hagdish could always undo what someone did that wasn't right, then why have Me'ilah? The Hagdish can always undo it. Teretz is, Hagdish can't undo it. Hagdish, you have to give it to Hagdish in order for it to be the Balabos. But short of it being by the Balabos, then you're over Me'ilah. That's why this whole Gemara is possible, is because you can take a Davar Shebekadusha and convert it, and by converting it, Rabbi Yochanan is right that the minute you convert it, Mid'oraisa, you have committed an act. Which act? The act of Me'ilah. Because you took something that you own, you still own it, but you're the shomer, if you will, of Hagdish, but you control it, and you can commit a sin with it by giving it to a mundane cause. You're committing the sin, and according to Rabbi Yochanan, you've already committed the sin by simply giving him the coin. And Rish Lakish admits to that. Yes, I agree with you, Rabbi Yochanan, because there's no alternative. I'm not going to say that someone who gives it to a bathhouse guy is not over when there's no Mashiach possible. So my scenario of Midaraisa can never happen. Then of course someone who converts Kodesh to Chol is going to be punished for it, or is over Me'ilah. So that's how you have to look at the Gemara. I understand the kashas. The kashas, it's sort of highly improbable why these things should happen. But the fact of the matter is Meila is possible. And again, where you have the possibility, although likelihood is not even a question, the possibility of doing Mashiach, as odd as it sounds in our world, that I would sit down to a barber and take the scissors and start moving them around, but the possibility of making Mashiach makes it a requirement according to Rosh Lakish that you have to do Mashiach. And if you don't do Mashiach, giving the money to the barber alone is not sufficient.
Rabbi, one clarifying question, if you would. So if I gave that coin to a Nochri,
Yeah.
then I'm not over Meila, but I have declared that coin or that coinage as hekdesh. And
No,
I give it to-
Michael, you're confusing two things. If I give money to the Nachri plays no part in my giving him the money. By receiving the money, he has made me violate a principle of the Torah because he can accept my money. There's no isser to do business with a goy.
No, I understand that, but I thought I understood you to say if it was to a Jew, he's transgressed Mila, but if it was to a non-Jew, he didn't transgress.
No.
He did. So he did it right away.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No. Either way, he has transgressed Me'ila. It's just that in the case of a goy, Resh Lakish agrees he's transgressed Me'ila, even though there's the possibility of Mashiach because you have Kalim, but there's no Mashiach by a goy. Now, the principle of no Mashiach by a goy is what makes Mashiach not required. But Me'ila happens anyway.
That's what I hoped you'd say. I misunderstood you.
You're right. So Me'ila happens right away, but Mashiach is not possible because he's a goy. Therefore, Rosh Lakish, in the case of the goy, would agree with Rabbi Yochanan that there was Me'ila the minute he transferred the money to the goy because there's no Mashiach in the realm of possibility.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So Mitzvah. Okay. So again, the beauty of this is that sometimes it strains the imagination at times to understand what the Gemara, but we have to accept certain premises, and the premise that we have to accept is that Hagdish is not balabos until you give it to Hagdish, and therefore you can violate Hagdish up until the point where you turn it over to them, and Hagdish has no authority to undo your chet, absolutely not. But we've also learned the principle that, and this is the proof to Rish Lakish, that de facto, by not having Mashiach as a possibility, is a proof that you need Mashiach. That's really sort of the flip side of this that takes a little imagination, is that we're learning a positive from a negative. The fact that you can't have Mashiach, and Rish Lakish agrees that you're over allowed midaraisa, shows that when Mashiach can remotely happen, it has to happen in order for you to be chayiv, unless it's a goy in which Mashiach isn't chal. Therefore, you don't have to worry about Mashiach. But if I transacted with you, Michael, and we're both erlich hayidin or whatever, I mean, we both have the chiyuv of Mashiach in a transaction. Otherwise, no transaction can happen. Then Rish Lakish says, listen, in that case, there is no Me'ila. Now, what's correct is that when you don't do the Mashiach, then the Me'ila doesn't happen. That's correct by a Yid, not by a Goy. So if I come to you, according to Rish Lakish, and you're a Jewish barber, and I say, I want a haircut, then I have to do Mashiach in order to be chayiv in Me'ila, because that Mashiach completes the transaction. By a goy, you don't need it, but by a Jew, you need it because without it, without the Mashiach, there's no Isser D'Oraisa. That's the upshot of what we've learned. Therefore, the Brisa can conclude that Rish Lakish is correct, that without Mashiach, in a case where Mashiach is chal by two Jews, without Mashiach, you cannot have an Isser, because merely giving the money alone will not make it a transaction, an Isser D'Oraisa.